Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Gavinsky's Tutorials. This is going to be a walkthrough of ToneBoosters' new Equalizer Pro app. Do a walkthrough and I want to look at what the new features are. So you can also find out about the new features on the ToneBoosters website. There's a nice chart that shows exactly everything that is new, and there's quite a lot that is new, and some of it is pretty significant. But the unfortunate thing is that this is not a free update. It is a separate purchase. So if you have the old one, you're going to have to buy this again if you want it. So this video will look at really, all the most important features of this, and I hope it will help you to decide whether it's worth upgrading or whether it's worth buying if you don't have it. And for anybody who has the app but doesn't really know how to use it, this video will also be pretty useful. Now, I'm not going to go through everything. Like, for example, I'm going to skip stuff like the way the preset system works, but that's all there in the detailed manual. Couple of little things to mention before I get started. So I'll put links to the website, if you want to buy this for desktop or just look at that chart and stuff. I'll put that and a link to the App Store in the pinned comment of this video. If you look at that pinned comment, you'll also find details about giveaways for this on various platforms. And the last thing I want to mention before I get started is my channel just finally passed the 10,000 subscribers milestone, which, wow, it really took a long time, 4.5 years. iOS is a small niche. It's much smaller now than it was during the pandemic as well, I'll tell you that. But look, I put a post on the community section of my channel today talking about why I'm seriously doubtful if I can really continue this channel. So if you're a fan of this channel and you don't want me to stop doing these kind of walkthrough videos, I'd strongly recommend you give that a read to try and understand why I've got these doubts about continuing. Okay, let's go back now to the walkthrough on ToneBoosters EQ. So first, okay, so here this is just a default. You can pull it off anyway. So here we're just hearing this fundamental 2. And here, what we're hearing is the EQ being applied only to sustain parts of the sound in this region of the frequency spectrum. So we're doing that using a special type of peak filter in here. So if I click here, you see that we have all these different kinds of filters. And if we look back at the website there, we can see that really there are a lot of new filter types. So brick wall filter, transient, sustain, direct, ambience, background, gating, sibilance. These are all new filter types that were not there in the old one. Here, I'm using transient peaking filter, and you hear now it's very poppy. That's emphasizing those attack portions of the sound, and it's not processing the sustain portions of the sound. Another thing is just, it's very well thought out, I think, this app. So if you go in and like, let's say we get a default patch and go in and just set a filter somewhere. Now let me just change that to a peaking filter. Let's say peaking, a dynamic peaking filter. Let me just change a couple of things here. And if I press here, I can duplicate in place, which will create a copy of this exactly at the same frequency, or I can duplicate, for example, up 1 octave. So let me do that, duplicate plus 1 octave. Okay, and then I take this one and duplicate that up an octave. And do that again, right? You know, it's very easy to set up this kind of filter signal. So that's what we've got here. Also, you know, notice the keyboard at the bottom that shows you the frequency of each filter. And you can also use that keyboard to create new filters as well. And we'll look at that a little bit later. Let's look at a few more things you can do. So here I have this set up, and we will look at that later, how I can use a different input. In this case, it's that one. I can use that to sidechain this one. I'll demo that later. Now here, this is just a sample, I don't know, some sort of mechanical thing. So we could use things like another one of the new filter types, the peaking background one, reducing the gain to do a kind of noise reduction. Or we could use that same type of filter, the background one, to emphasize background sounds. And background sounds are basically the lower level sounds. So I just pressed rewind there. Wait a second. So listen to that clanking sound. So you hear how the clanking sound doesn't really sound like it's being filtered, yeah? So let's change this filter type to just a peaking direct type. So everything the same, you know, gain is the same, the Q is the same, the frequency is the same, but it's totally different sound because now it's processing the kind of what it identifies as the main signal components of that. And again, if we change that to ambience, this also kind of really focusing on some of the background stuff. It's not explained very clearly what is the difference between ambience and background mode in this. So maybe the developer, if he's watching this, could write a comment in the YouTube comment section clarifying that. Let's look at this one. This is another one where I just changed the background one to direct. Let's try this one, which shows a gating type effect. So with different filters in this, it's very important to pay attention to the threshold. So depending on the filter type, it may be what is above the threshold level that gets processed, or it may be what's below it. In a filter like this, it's going to be what's below that gets affected. And, you know, we can make that gating effect more pronounced by bringing the release time down. And we can make it less pronounced by increasing that release time. Now, next example of something that you can do in the new version that, actually, maybe you could do this in the old one. I think you could. But I think there are some differences. Again, maybe the developer could comment on what is different. So here, if we look at the range here, it is set to positive amount. And what I've done is set this up for a sidechain setup. And I'll explain in a second how to do that in AUM. Now, I've got this channel muted, so this is the sidechain channel, but we're not hearing it. But let me unmute it. And so now we've got this kick drum sound. And the way it's set up here, this channel has just some noise. So let me take the EQ off. Okay, so we got that noise, and now we are filtering that noise. And because we've set the range to a positive amount, what's happening is the kick signal is increasing the gain. So every time the kick sounds, the gain is going up. So if I change the range to a negative value, now we have the opposite. And so here we're hearing this filtered noise sound in between the kick sounds, not on the kick sounds. So as I said, I would mention how to set this up in AUM, the sidechain thing. So let's just say we want to start with a completely fresh instance. So I click here, and again, this is just going to be how it works in AUM, the host app that I'm using here on the iPad. So I can open up Equalizer Pro, and if I look here, this is A41, okay. So now I go to this channel and I want to use this as the sidechain. I press here, I go to multibus audio unit instances, and then I find 4.1, the one that I want to connect this to, and I press that, and now these are linked. So that's the way sidechaining works in this particular host. And a final little example before we look at the UI in more detail here. So here, Skaka just playing a tambourine sound. And then here, I've got, again, a peaking transient type filter set up here. And play around with the release. So this will determine how long it considers the transient portion of the sound to be. So with a higher release value, it will be EQing more of the earlier part of sounds. And with the lower release value, it's really only EQing that very first portion of the sound. If we go back to the sustain example here, we also have a release control, and this will determine how quickly the sustain, well, again, it's very similar to the way the transient one works. So if I set this to a very low value here, we'll start getting the filter coming in very soon after the initiation of the sound. If I increase the release value, that filter processing will come in later in the sound. Okay, so let's look at a default patch and go through some of the basic principles about how the app works and the UI and so on. So just double tap somewhere to set up a filter. And if you tap in the middle, it will set a peaking filter. If you tap up in the top right, it will do a high shelf filter. If you tap on the bottom right, it will do a high cut filter. I'm just using the undo button to quickly get rid of these. I could use the trash icon as well. If you tap on the upper left, you'll get a low shelf filter. And if you tap on the bottom left, you'll get a low cut filter. So back to this one, we can use this to minimize. We can close this box using the X. We can enable or disable the filter, this individual filter. Up here, we can just enable or disable the entire effect. We can audition that filter, and we can trash it. Now, let's just... change that. And so here I've set the gain pretty high on that. I can use this to flip it so that that becomes a negative value. I can use lock. I can use lock to lock the gain level so that now when I move it around, we're only going to affect the frequency. I can't accidentally increase or decrease the gain. If I press this lock button again, then now it will allow me to, whoops. This is happening because of switching between mouse and touch, by the way. It's nothing wrong with the app, it's just the way things are in an iPad when you're switching between using a mouse and using your finger. I just much prefer using my finger, but sometimes I use the mouse because I want you to see what I'm doing. So if you see, this is snapping to 0. Once it gets close to 0, it will snap to it. We can tap to enter values and it will zoom in, which is really nice. We can change the color by dragging here. If you look here, attack is not enabled at the moment, and that's because this is not dynamic. So it's only when we actually put in a range value, positive or negative, that the attack knob will become relevant. So here we've got dynamic EQ now, and because we've set range to positive, it's going to increase the gain in the EQ when the input signal is louder, and the attack will just control how quickly the gain gets increased when the input signal is louder. And here with a negative range value. If we tap on this little hamburger thing, we have various things: reset, remove, invert, zero gain, duplicate in place or up an octave or down an octave, split left and right channels, split mid and side, split frequency. That will just basically create a duplicate of it at a very slightly offset frequency. Make low shelf, make high shelf, and so on. Then here we can cycle between different filters if we have more than one filter. Here then again, just to look quickly at the various filter types, we already talked about all of these special filter types. So those are available in peaking, low shelf, and high shelf modes. And then here we have brick wall type. And we have this tilting filter as well, which can be quite handy. You always like those. And band pass, notch, low cut, and high cut. I'll change it back to a dynamic one there. So here we can set the steepness of the filter. So again, this is one of the things that is improved in this new version. You can do much steeper filters. Here, what you see here will depend on, how many channels you're sending in, and so on. So here are the only options that we have in this, and these are the only options available on iOS. So what you get will depend on your host app and so on. So we can have left and right, or pick one or the other, and we can have mid or side processing. Now, as I mentioned, it's very handy to drag along here to scale the y-axis. I'm just gonna close this. Then the keyboard, double tap to add a new filter at a particular frequency. Drag to change what note the frequency is at. Handy. If you're using a mouse and just hovering, when you move over this, you'll see what note it is before you select it. So let's say I know I want a C7. Okay, drag along. Got a C7. All right. Now I double tap there. Now, this has EQ matching. So basically we can give it a reference signal. So for example, you could use this when mastering to take a track that you want your track to sound like, and you just get it to analyze that. So if you remember, I set it up so that another instance of fundamental would be the sidechain for this. So if I press external here, what I can do is press record, and now what it's doing is it's recording that output of that second instance of fundamental, right? That one. And so you let that go for about 10 seconds. And so now that's there and we can see that signal. And now we can record the input signal, so what we're hearing at the moment. So that's recording that, and it's now showing us a curve that shows the difference between our reference signal and our signal. And then we can, let me just set this back to default again. So then we can use amount to bring that down a little bit. So we can use amount to just drop in filters at different places, and then we can adjust them manually as we like to get things to match right. Now, if you don't want to record, you can load sounds. So pressing load will open up your file browser, and you can select a file in that way. And you can trash just the reference or just the input, and you can just trash the whole thing. And again, if you regret that, you got undo and redo. Now, here we can control some things related to the analyzer. So we have 3 windows here: curves, settings, and spectrogram. So with this selected here, it's showing us our just what we're listening to here on this channel. And we can have that pre or post EQ. Or we can see the external signal, which in this case is coming from that second instance of fundamental. and we can see the spectrogram if we want or not. And there are a few other things here that I usually don't play around with. You'll find details for them in the manual. But one thing maybe you might want to change, let's just turn off the spectrogram for a second. You might want to change the time constant with shorter values here. You're going to get a more, let's say, dynamic spectrum to analyze. That might be useful, or you might want something with a bit less movement. Just depends. And various things here again, for example, resolution. If you increase bands per octave, you're going to get potentially a more detailed signal to analyze, or a more detailed representation of the signal, I should say. So I'll go back and turn on the spectrogram again, and then click here, and we can do things like we can change the color, and again, sort of stuff that will affect the level of detail we're seeing. And we can pause it and so on. And again, if you want more details on this, refer to the manual. And then the last thing that two things that I'm going to look at. So one is that we can just fade this down. Actually, no, I pressed that. Actually, didn't really want to press that one. I don't actually really know what the use of this one is. It's there in the manual though. What I wanted to press, in fact, was this one. So this one will open up this table view. So this is quite a good way of getting an overview. For example, you want to see exactly what type each filter is, and you want to change it, and you can tap anywhere, and you can enter details with a keyboard and so on. If you scroll down, you can add a new filter using the plus button and all that kind of stuff. And so then the last thing I'll look at is what happens when you press down here. So here we can adjust the overall output gain. And then we have a couple of scaling controls. So this will allow us to scale all the EQ gains without, losing our initial values. So we can experiment with what it sounds like with the gain reduced on all of them without having to go in and actually adjust separately the gain for each, and then not remember, what our starting value was. And we can use this to just quickly reverse all of those. And we can freeze. So let's say, for example, I think this is really too much and I want to bring it down to a value around 50%. And then I want this to become my new default value. Then I just press freeze, and now that's the new default, and that now is the value represented by 100%. And then EQ range, again, this will just scale the ranges if we're using range controls. So let's see this here, range control. You see now I've brought this range down and that is no longer moving up. And again, we can use the freeze function here, and we can reverse everything if we want to. And then the last thing I'll talk about in this video is the loudness settings. And if this has been useful for you, everyone, do please smash the like. And if you have 1 second, just write a comment. I've spent all day learning how to use this app. If you take 1 second or 5 seconds to just write a little comment, it'll help the YouTube algorithm boost this video a little bit, make sure that more people see it. Thank you, thank you. So here we can press record, and what record will do is it will analyze the loudness of the pre and post signals. And once we've done that, then we can see here that currently the post signal is louder than the pre signal. So we can then press outmatch, and that will match the two signals so that it becomes easier to compare them objectively. They're both going to be at the same loudness. So really cool, I think, this beautiful UI and very well thought out. It's not too hard to learn. The manual does have a lot of detail. If I would give one tip maybe for looking at these ToneBoosters manuals, the thing is that they kind of start with a lot of the boring stuff, you know, about setup and everything. You're probably going to want to just skip over the first pages as long as you're kind of basically familiar with how most plugins work, and then just go straight in to the meat. But very good manual. I really appreciate them. You can see here, for example, some stuff that I didn't cover here because I'm not, dealing with all these different channels, just working with stereo here. But yeah, so you can read up about some of the stuff that I didn't cover here. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.